next podcast for Cage Side Combat. I'm Conor, and I'm here as always with Kyle.
Hello.
And Brad.
What's up, guys?
We're here to talk about all things MMA from last week, as well as a bit of boxing for once. I mean, going a bit off cue, but we thought we might as well mention it.
Why not?
First off, we're going to review the UFC from last weekend's, and we'll start with a look at the predictions table. So, in last place with 17 points is me. However, I'm going to say this now. I'll probably say it again later. If I went with my verdict, MMA predictions, hashtag please sponsor us.
Hashtag.
I would have been in first place.
Oh.
I got placement in the top 25% in the world on verdict MMA. I got a gold medal.
That's pretty impressive. Well done.
I think I guessed 3 fights dead on. But once again, in joint first place with 18 points is Kyle and Brad.
Wow.
So I'm only 1 point behind you, getting closer.
It's getting close.
I feel like we didn't pick the same. We picked the same fighter a fair bit, but not like method either. So.
No, wow. I'll look back at it. So Kyle, you got 1 point for the O'Malley fight, 1 point for the Ortega fight, and 3 points for the Cyborg fight.
Mm-hmm.
And then Brad, you got 3 points for the Vieira fight, 1 point for the O'Malley fight, and 1 point for the Ortega fight.
Oh, Caitlin Vieira just became a new favourite female fighter.
Oh yeah, I forgot you bet on Cunit Sky, didn't you?
Yeah. If I'd have just picked Cyborg, like the normal answer would have been, I'd have beaten you.
Yeah, but when have you ever given a normal answer?
I know.
But the winner of the weekend was me with 7 points.
Wow,
but
the comeback.
If I went with my verdict MMA predictions, please sponsor us. Please sponsor us.
Please, my rent is due.
Please. I would have had 10 points, so I would have been in first.
Oh.
But I'm not bitter. It's all right. It's all right, I'm not bitter.
Who did you pick on your verdict?
On my verdict, I think I got the Cyborg, O'Malley and Arlovski fight dead on. And then I predicted Ortega in the first round, but I said sub. So, yeah,
makes sense.
I got the points for me. But moving on to the actual cards, I think the biggest story is probably coming out of the co-main event, where Brian Ortega finished Frankie Edgar for the first time in Edgar's career. What did we make of this?
That fact in itself is absolutely crazy, given how long Frankie's been fighting, that he's never been finished before.
I think we're bigging up Ortega about it, but I think the fact that it's only up until now that Frankie's been finished shows how good of a fighter he is. But I think, what do we make of this title shot earning performance from Ortega?
Yeah, I mean, he fully deserves it. He absolutely deserves it. And quite honestly, like, as much as I love Frankie Edgar, I was excited about the Holloway fight, but the excitement I had for it was because it was just Frankie Edgar and it was Max Holloway. I didn't particularly like the matchup too much. I thought it was just going to be Frankie wrestling and ground and pounding, or it was going to be Max just piecing him up on the feet and using his length to stay away from him. I think this fight's far more interesting. I genuinely, I can't pick a winner, and I think we might come on to it a bit later. But obviously with the UFC Hawaii being trying to get sorted out, if they can sort that in an outside stadium in Hawaii and have a card filled with Hawaiians, that'll just be absolutely incredible.
Yeah, definitely. I've got written down in my notes one of my favourite moments of the whole pay-per-view. Maybe my favourite moment of the pay-per-view was, first of all, just it's nice to see educated MMA fans, but also something that really tells you about how special Brian Ortega is. As soon as Frankie Edgar dips his head and Brian Ortega wraps his neck, the whole crowd gasps. And the whole crowd is on edge. As soon as you see Frankie's head pop out, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. I thought that was amazing. That really tells you how fast Brian Ortega is moving up in the world.
I mean, like, Ortega touching someone's neck, it's like watching an Attenborough documentary, watching a great white turn towards a seal, isn't it? You're like, oh shit, like, it's about to go down.
I do want Attenborough commentary over an Ortega fight. I
On
think
the Contender
probably
Series.
over the Cub Swanson.
That's really weird you should say that, because I seen a meme video before, and somebody had edited Attenborough commentary over a Bisping. I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Bisping versus Belfort fight. And I was like, I never knew I needed this in my life until right now. I was like, sack Snoop Dogg. Get Attenborough commentating on the UFC.
Definitely.
Can we get him and
Definitely.
Snoop Dogg? That would be special.
Yes. Just in one room. I don't even care if they're commentating. I just want
Just
Attenborough and Snoop
Put them in a
Dogg
room with a
one
camera.
room.
Yeah.
I did think it was a really good card start to finish. One of the things, I mean, we said it last week about how these lesser talked about cards can often turn out to be really, really good, which has happened the last 3 cards now, when everyone's been complaining about the oversaturation. And then the cards have, like, I actually stayed up and watched all of this, and I was actually thoroughly entertained until 7 a.m. when I went to sleep. And, like, I was genuinely kind of sad when the main event was over so quick. I was like, I'm kind of not ready to go to bed yet. I want more fights. And then Oblivion took me. But yeah, great card from start to finish. And like you said, like, it's actually quite cool seeing the level of education on MMA fans. Like, they actually are paying attention to these cards that might not have these massive names, but clearly have really skilled fighters. And especially a card where they allowed the likes of Ketlin Vieira and Sean O'Malley and Ortega, you know, young up-and-comers, to get their moment in the limelight, rather than just going, oh, fuck it, you know, let's try and get Conor on a card, and if not, let's try and get Nate Diaz on a card and just hope that sells.
Well, you mentioned the main event, Cyborg, and, well, how quick it was. Cyborg, unsurprisingly, ran through Yana Kunitskaya on her way to a first-round stoppage. But I think the big question is what's next for her.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt it has to be Amanda Nunes. The only thing that worries me is what if she kind of does what she did to Holly Holm, where you're like, this is going to be a huge matchup for Cyborg, and then she kind of wins it and didn't ever look in danger of losing it. And then we're like, once she beats Nunes, where do we go? I don't know if there's anywhere you can go from there. It has to be Nunes. There's nobody that can reach the levels that Cyborg does. I don't think I've ever seen anyone as scared in an octagon before. Watching that fight, it was quite unnerving to an extent. Yana Kunitskaya.
Well, I think it was literally after the first punch, the very first punch Cyborg landed, rocked Yana Kunitskaya, and she took her down quite well, and there was kind of good pressure against the cage, but her Cyborg's power just looked beyond
it was ridiculous.
what is possible of a human.
Yeah, and she said afterwards, Yana Kunitskaya, that she was incredibly nervous just because she was stepping in there. Like, as soon as she got in that octagon and realised that she was going to be across from Chris Cyborg, the greatest female fighter probably ever, she said after the fight that she was just absolutely bricking it leading up to the bell.
I'd be fucking bricking it.
Especially when you trash talked on Cyborg's power during the build-up.
Yeah,
that is.
I know, yeah. That was the funniest bit. Felt one punch and was like, oh no.
You'd have to pay me McGregor levels of money to get in there with Cyborg.
Yeah.
I mean, she got $100,000 for that fight, which it dwarfs anything she got for Invicta. So, like, I think she even put on Instagram, like, thanks Dana for the support, and then in brackets, like, $5 signs. It was like, she basically was just getting paid to get battered for, well, it was only 3 minutes. It was all right. There was a minute when she had her back, and she reached around and grabbed her neck, and I was like, girl, if you get that neck and sink in that rear naked choke, that will, I mean, for a minute when I saw it was going to happen, I was like, oh shit, here we go. And I thought, if you choke her out from a random rear naked choke, they're going to give her an immediate rematch, and you will have the wrath of Cyborg. So I was like, it's probably better to get it out of the way now, so you don't have to come back to it like a more pumped up Cyborgs. But yeah, I mean, she is incredible, isn't she? I mean, obviously there's a controversy around steroid abuse, and so she'll never ever get the respect she deserves. I don't personally think she's still using. You know, the argument is whether she's still got residual benefits from that steroid use. I mean, personally, I've read quite a few scientific papers on the endocrinology of women after steroid use, and there is arguments to say that the effects don't last. So whether or not she should be respected for her dominance is possibly arguable. But I think she's just skilled. I think
she's unbelievable. But it's her new style and her new boxing coach. She showed it in the home fight, showed it in the last fight. She's now a cyborg with unbelievable power, but unbelievable patience. She picks the right shot each time. There is no wasted movement, no wasted throwing. It is each shot that is thrown, even like feints, they are perfect.
I mean, like, during UFC 214, when she does her walk to the cage, that was the unveiling, like, that fight against Tonya Evinger was the unveiling of the new Chris Cyborg, like, the one that's not just, I'm going to steam you down, knock you to the floor and ground and pound you. So after she'd worked with Jason Perillo. But there's that amazing soundbite from Joe Rogan when she's getting into the cage where he says, if you've never seen Chris Cyborg fight, prepare yourself for violence. And then she came in, the round open, and I had friends that had never seen Cyborg fight before, and I hyped it up enough and be like, oh, this girl is going to murk her. And then she was very patient, and she lasted 3 rounds. And so everyone was kind of like, but it kind of annoys me now. Every time Cyborg fights, they use that soundbite. Like, I counted it in the promo, the extended promo for UFC 222. They used the quote 3 times. And you just see, every time she's mentioned, you just hear Joe Rogan go, prepare yourself for violence. I'm like, but it's not violence anymore. It's like quite crisp and quite reserved technique. Like, she doesn't just storm the cage. She actually waits for a moment. She's become something of a counter puncher as well, which is why the home fight didn't get as explosive as everyone anticipated it would do. They were both just waiting for each other.
Well, I like how since she's come to UFC, she hasn't kind of just sat at where she was previously. She didn't have that. She's obviously got great confidence and looked unbeatable outside of the UFC. But I like how she's improved herself to a whole nother level since joining the UFC. And I think it's just no one can handle the pressure. I was trying to work out, and everyone's trying to look for holes in her game and trying to work out where could she be beaten. But I feel this is one fighter that you just can't see that. No. She will walk straight up to you, she'll knock you out, and that's pretty much the end of it.
Like, obviously, an element of promotion to it, but just watching the countdown, and they have the Jackson Wink MMA judges, what am I looking for? Trainers. And, you know, there's obviously Holly Holm there. She's just fought her. During that run-up, they were saying, like, oh, we've seen holes in her game. And then Yana Kunitskaya's trainers were going, yeah, we've seen those holes. We know exactly how to exploit them. I'm like, what are these holes? What are you talking about? Like, I'd love for someone to just name one of the gaps that they're seeing in a game, because I don't see it. No. The weight cut, maybe. Get her down to 135, that's the hole in her game.
Maybe. I mean, if you look at the game plans that Kunitskaya came in with and that Holly Holm came in with, clearly Jackson Wink think that grappling is the way. You know, you don't want to stand with Chris Cyborg. You know, she's either going to pick you apart over 5 rounds or demolish you. So clearly they think it's grappling. But I feel like Chris Cyborg is a legit black belt in jiu-jitsu. Yeah. And when you really look at it, there aren't a ton of super high level grapplers in the female divisions, especially who weigh even close to what Cyborg weighs. So yeah, I'm not sure there is anybody, and that's not to put it down to like, oh, there's just not the level of competition for Cyborg, because everybody who she fights, she demolishes, even people like Holly Holm. So that's not what I'm saying, but it's almost like there's a fighter who realises they're good at grappling and in the clinch needs to rise up, but I don't think it's going to happen. And even if they did, they'd probably get knocked out.
That's the thing.
I read an interesting thing. I don't know how trustworthy it is or anything like that, but I read that she walks around and she gets into the cage at close to 180. Like, she actually has a severe cut to 145, and I was like, Christ alive. I was like, that's just ridiculous. But what I can't understand is, like, yeah, she's a big woman. There's all this conjecture about the amount of muscle on her frame and stuff. But, like, it's not impossible for a woman to get that size. Bellator has a legit featherweight division. Invicta's got a legit featherweight division. Why?
Gabby Garcia.
Because she can't even cut to 265, never mind 145.
I was thinking about that earlier.
145.
Yeah, it's just, but I mean, that's how scary her grappling is, because that's who Chris Cyborg trains.
That's what I was
with.
thinking. I was thinking, Nunes is physically strong. She could clinch with her. We saw Holly Holm have success in the clinch with Cyborg. Nunes is strong, and then I was like, she trains grappling with 265-pound Gabby Garcia.
It's just insane.
And Gabby's not even. It's not even just like it's just her size that makes her
She's
good.
a
She's a world champion. And he's like fucking grappling with Francis Ngannou, who could actually grapple.
Gabby Garcia, the Francis Ngannou. If Francis Ngannou could grapple,
maybe
that's brilliant.
Quote.
Rising should do that fight. That'd be more entertaining watching a batter another grandma. But I mean, everyone's banking on Nunes to put up a fight. What do we honestly do if Nunes gets battered in one round? Because it's possibly unlikely, but it's not impossible. Nunes is an incredibly skilled striker, but so is Cyborg, and I don't care how much muscle Nunes puts on. She's defending against Pennington, so she's still going to have to make 135. So then she can't be that big, unless she's going to go through a fucking horrendous cut to 135, just so she has the muscle on her. And it's even then, it's like we're hoping that it's that strength that's going to make her the difference to all these other featherweights. And then what if she's not? We've got Megan Anderson. That's it, and then Cyborg can basically retire.
Yeah, well, going back to like game plans to beat Cyborg, and you're speaking about wrestling, that's kind of what I was thinking. Because if you had Habib, kind of like a Habib style fighter in that division, or someone who could kind of take advantage of the position that Yana had in the fight, then possibly. But as you said, there just isn't that. There isn't any legit fighters like that.
There must be a Nurmagomedov female cousin somewhere, because I just seen another two of them have been signed to ACB. Another two Nurmagomedovs, and they're both undefeated, and they're Habib's cousins, and his brothers signed with the UFC, had a fight, and has dropped out of it. I think one of them's gone to fucking Bellator. There's Nurmagomedovs all over the fucking shop. Surely there's one woman in a lot of them, and surely they were like, oh, you train with us, you do not train with other women.
Here you go.
You train with us, we wrestled bear today. So, she might have like a powerful monobrow and a neck beard like her brothers, but like, surely she'd be able to take on Cyborg.
I'm putting that Russian accent top of your accent list.
For sure.
That's definitely going top.
You'd literally need the female equivalent of Daniel Cormier. You'd need legitimate wrestling caliber, Olympic standard kind of game. You'd need hell of a chin, ridiculous cardio, great mental game. That's
strength.
And that doesn't exist.
At least strength that's kind of getting close to Cyborg's level.
Yeah, and Daniel Cormier is so good because he has all of those things. It's not like those are common traits. Daniel Cormier is like he's the best light heavyweight not named John Jones. So you're not just gonna stumble across one of those in the street and be like, you can fight Chris Cyborg. I mean, even if you did, they'd probably be like, I'll pass. So
yeah. But the one thing I'm saying is, if Cyborg back all those years ago, when it was the heavy rumours of Cyborg versus Rousey, when Rousey was in her prime, I think Rousey would have beaten her. Looking at it now, because kind of in Rousey's prime, not Rousey now. I'm talking Rousey pre-movies. I think
the only way she'd beat Cyborg is if they agreed to do it at straw weight, and she had to cut all the way to 15 pounds. No, but Cyborg came into the ring on a stretcher.
No, I think the clinch. I think in the clinch, she has the chance to get the better of it because she has that level of judo. I don't know whether she finishes on the ground, but I
just
genuinely...
to fucking get into the clinch first.
I think she does.
She couldn't even avoid Holly Holm.
I was going to say, not now. She's fighting Stephanie McMahon and barely doing Samoan drops on that, so
Yeah.
I can
not now.
faintly hear Edmund Tarverdian head movement. Head off. Okay, fuck it.
The worst, just the worst ever.
I've seen Cyborg still because there was a while when Cyborg was petitioning Becky Lynch for a fight in the WWE, and now I've seen her say like, "Oh, you ran from me in UFC, I'll fight you in WWE." I'm like, has anyone actually told her it's a fix? Like, I'm feeling like they're gonna book her and think, "Oh yeah, this will be cool." Like 2 UFC fighters, and she's gonna come in and actually beat her live on TV, and everyone will be like, Chris, no.
Works for Brock. It works for Brock. If you annoy Brock, he punches you every now and then. So
don't even get me started on Brock Lesnar in WWE at the moment.
Oh,
I think moving away from that, controversy in the prelims as Hector Lombard got disqualified for KOing Holloway after the round finished. Do we agree that this was a DQ?
yeah, it had to be. I felt it was a weird one because it definitely had to be a DQ because CB Holloway had no idea where he was, so there's no way he could have continued. But
he left on a stretcher.
Yeah, I know that it goes down as a loss for Hector Lombard, but it was a very nice combination that he threw to knock him down. I just wish it had been. I wish that had been in the actual round, and then it would have been a spectacular KO. So it's a little bit gutting, but yeah, definitely.
The argument against that, though, against it being a DQ, was one, he threw that combination seconds. He threw pretty much the same combination seconds before seconds before the round ending. And I saw some arguments online that it's just like muscle memory for fighters. That it's kind of an instant reaction for he's been training that and they've done it. He would have done it multiple times. That Holloway's going to throw the leg kick or body kick, and he'll reply with the 1-2 punch.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
You could say,
and I don't think Hector Lombard should be, and he's not really being, too criticised for it because he's a fighter. At the end of the day, he's going to fight until you put him off. I think it is potentially the ref's fault because he's not really near them when Lombard throws it. He's not. As soon as the bell goes, the ref should be in between them just in case. You can't risk. That's literally why. You can't risk 2 punches being thrown. It's not Hector Lombard's fault though. He's a fighter. He might not have even heard the bell. There's always that. He's just in the moment, and like you said, muscle memory. He's training combinations so that when his corner shout them, he knows what it is and he hits it perfectly. So you can't blame him.
I mean, I have to say, like, when I watched it live, at first I was a bit like, oh, this is a bit either way, but then obviously they replayed it about 6 or 7 times at different speeds. And the one thing I will say to that is, like, it was a very quick one too, but the bell went like a half second before the first, and the ref did shout stop twice before the second one was landed. And like, I know you could say like it's just muscle memory, but I also have heard the argument from fighters. It's like, well, we don't just train to throw combinations and punches and counters. We train to hear the bell. We train to stop when the round's over. Like, they literally train to a bell, like in the thing. And fighters have come out and said, like the argument, because it's happened before and it'll happen again. Fighters have said, like, no matter how loud it is in there, you hear the bell. Like, it's specifically a very piercing noise, so you can hear it. It definitely couldn't have continued because, like you say, Holloway was just out of it. I will say this though, I think Holloway did act up quite a lot because he, like, we've seen fucking Alistair Overeem after he got launched into orbit by Ngannou, and he wasn't as out of it as, and like Holloway was like, where am I? Where am I? And then like his coaches go like, "You're in the ring. You've been knocked out." And
Another
he's going,
flawless impression.
Where am I? And then
we've gotten 2 Brad impressions in one podcast.
Wow.
But and then he carried it on. He's on the stretcher, and I'm like, right, okay, mate. You know, you've been announced as the victor. Chill out. And he's still there. You can see him mouthing to him like, where? And you're like, all right, you've fucking won. Chill out. Like, I think they should redo the fight.
Yeah.
Like, if Hector has said he's going to contest it, you can do that. I don't think it'll really make a difference. I know a few people like Chelsea and have said like they voiced their opinions that it should be overturned to a no contest. But I think it was a very blatant, maybe not intentional fully, but I definitely don't think he. You mean, what do they expect the ref to literally restrain them both to the point where they can't fight? Like, you have a responsibility to pull your own punches as well when the ref says enough's enough. And it goes back to the issue of point deduction for things like eye gouging and groin shots as well. I think they need to start just implementing a no tolerance approach to these kinds of things, because I don't know if we're going to mention it again, but the John Dodson fight, I think it was like 4 groin shots in that fight, and a few of them were like pretty vicious, pretty straight on the dick, to be quite honest. Like there was one where they slowed it down, and it just connected, and you just hear the whole male population of the crowd there go, "Oh!" And then John like takes like a couple of minutes, and again, that's like, you can't argue that that's not going to alter the fight in some way. Whether or not Pedro would have won otherwise is debatable. Whether or not Dodson would have finished him otherwise is debatable. But it does change the outcome of the fight, and it's against the rules. But I don't even think a point was taken, and there was at least 3. So like, I think even Rogan said on the commentary like, this is too much. Like, they need to take a point, and it just keeps happening. I mean, at what point do you not assume it's not intentional? Like,
I think that's a Brad's beef subject for the future.
Pre-beef.
But there's many impressive performances. Sean O'Malley, Ketlin Vieira, and of course Andrei Arlovski. Impressive performance. I think he might be in the title picture again now.
Hooray.
After that, what were we most impressed with on Saturday?
Andrei Arlovski being able to reach Stefan Struve's face. Now, my actual highlight of the entire card was Alexander Hernandez, who I admit I had not heard coming into this. He was cocky when he walked in. He had this amazing bravado, and Benil Dariush is no joke. And he made him. The one thing I will say, I don't know if you saw it, like, he goes to tap the hand at the start and then front kicks him, and it's like, you little dick.
That's not cool.
Nah. But I mean, he didn't really do anything, so it's not really like you can say Dariush lost because of it. But even so, I was watching. Like, I actually had a mate watching it with me here, and he's not really into his MMA. But when he knocked him out, he was like, "Oh my god, that was awesome!" And so it's great to see like non-fans get excited about something, especially about a lightweight that's unknown. I mean, like, that division needs anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
There's about 10 people actually in title contention. We don't need any more. Barely got a championship fight.
Yeah. I think the thing I was most impressed with, or albeit, slightly ironic, I was impressed at Stefan Struve's inability to throw jabs.
A jab.
That was a bit... Yeah, that was a rough point. The roughest point, definitely. Of the card, but I'd say otherwise, Sean O'Malley's fight was my highlight. Yeah. Obviously, apart from Brian Ortega winning, that was phenomenal. But yeah, he's just one of those guys that I feel like I have to watch his fights now. The fight was great. He put on a great performance, and then to battle through adversity as well. By he didn't break his foot, but seriously injured it, and then to keep fighting, and then the post-fight interview where he's lying down and Rogan's interview him stood over him was brilliant. So
that I was going to say that was my favourite moment. If yours is the crowd going mental for Ortega, my favourite is the post-fight interview. It was brilliant.
Yeah,
I know. Rogan doesn't want his MMA show to just become like the revolving door for UFC fighters to start getting publicity through Rogan, but I would love to see Sean O'Malley on there and see how obliteratingly high they can get together. Did either of you watch Mackenzie Dern's fight?
I haven't seen I didn't watch it, but I've read quite a lot into it.
Yeah,
I read some interviews afterwards, and she's saying that she's never gonna, or try to at least. She said she's never gonna leave it to the judges again.
Yeah.
I mean, her striking was better than I anticipated it being, but it looked pretty amateurish, and there was quite a few moments when Yoda was very close to finishing it, but there was one point. I mean, I don't even think she got her to the ground until the end of the third round. But Christ, I've never actually watched her in jiu-jitsu, but she gets her to the ground, she leaps on her, and it was like if I was attacked by Tony Ferguson. Like, the way she jumped on her, wrapped around her, got to her back, and was so close to a submission in like less than a second. I was like, oh shit, this girl knows her stuff. And just the fact that it looked like Anne Hathaway beating someone up is just like a bonus. Like, it's hilarious.
Yeah, she has that thing where she's such a high level specialist that it's like watching people who are mediocre strikers strike with Wonder Boy, or when Damian Maia gets somebody to the ground. It's like you're not in your world anymore. It's like you're in deep waters now. So yeah, her striking though is. The striking is fine. I think she can get by without the striking, but she needs to get wrestling, because otherwise she's going to have the problem that Damian Maia has, where she can't take people down, so she can't win fights.
I was going to say, I think it is going to be the female Maia, because her ability to get people to Yoda to the ground just did not seem to be there. And as far as I know, Yoda's not like Yoda, isn't some like high level wrestler. I mean, she barely attempted to take her down, and when she did get her in a clinch, she just looked like she wasn't really going anywhere. But yeah, I mean, my other standout on the card in terms of female fighters is Ketlin Vieira as well. I mean, undefeated going into this. Kat Zingano is an incredible fighter, and she pieced her apart. That split decision is a joke. I mean, shout out to Adelaide Bird for trying to like single-handedly ruin combat sports. She gave 2 rounds to Kat Zingano. Kat was getting beaten up for 3 straight rounds. I thought it was there was some argument she might have won the second, but apart from, I mean, even that, I struggled to see how none of the judges gave it a 30-27. But how Adelaide Bird gave 2 rounds to Kat Zingano, I thought that was just a fucking joke.
It's the Joe Rogan quote that I think I sent into the chat earlier, which is where John Anik says, "I met her and she's a very nice lady," and Rogan replies, "So is my mum, but I wouldn't want her judging fights."
Yeah, I forgot about that. That was definitely one of the highlights.
Yeah, DC's just chuckling to himself, and he's like, "Someone get Joe Rogan! Someone get Joe Rogan!" This broke the record for the most split decisions of any UFC card ever, and apparently on every single one of those, it was Adelaide Bird that gave the alternative fighter. It's like, is there not some kind of like? Because like, I know when I do marking for like students at uni, we have to go to courses all the time where we're given a piece to mark, and if we don't give it the right mark, we're not allowed to mark. Does she not have to go for like some kind of arbitration where they're like, right, Adelaide, we know what this fight is, score it, and she's going like, yeah, it was 10 rounds to Canelo and 2 to Triple G, and they're like, right, no, you're off, bye.
Well, that link from Canelo and Triple G moves us nicely into the world of boxing. I think we'll start with what happens Saturday with Deontay Wilder stopping Luis Ortiz in the 10th round in a really, really good fight. What do we make of it?
Yeah, it was really good. I thought I didn't watch it live. I watched it the next morning, knowing what had happened, and I thought it was really. It felt like a movie in the way that you watch Joshua versus Klitschko, and then really you look at Joshua. His main rival is Deontay Wilder. They obviously Deontay Wilder had to get past Ortiz. AJ's got to get past Joshua Parker. Both undefeated, little bit older guys, tough to deal with for anybody. And you see AJ have this incredible fight of the year with Klitschko where he gets dropped. He's probably not winning the fight on the scorecards, has to come back and gets a TKO when people were thinking, how is he going to come back into this fight? And then it was watching the Wilder fight, I was like, this is happening like again. This is like a movie. It's like we're seeing both characters go through the same thing so that they can meet like in the finale. It was weird. It was a really good fight though. So
yeah, I was watching it live. It was on at the exact same time as the People's main event, Arlovski versus Struve. So I was kind of like, I had two screens next to each other, but like I had both volumes on half, so I could kind of hear some of the Rogan commentary, could kind of hear some of the boxing commentary, and just every now and then it was like flicking backwards and forwards, so I was kind of getting half of each. But I mean, all I could see from that, I mean, it was a great fight, don't get me wrong, but all I could see from that was, I mean, Ortiz is a good boxer. He's a very, very good boxer, but he was getting Wilder was getting pieced apart for most of it, and I feel like if Ortiz was a bit younger and he had a bit more of his power of his youth and a bit more of his stamina, that fight would have been over. And like there was quite a few points when there was a point in I think the 8th round when Wilder was basically out on his feet and then the ref came and broke them apart, and he was 100% saved by the ref. Like he'd have been out if he got knocked over again. I don't know, like, I mean, armchair criticism, me here criticising a professional heavyweight champion, but I just, like, he has a very strange stance where he stands he's almost like an MMA fighter, like, he's very much like that John Jones, like, his lead legs are really out in front and he's holding his arm out there, it keeps him at distance, but he keeps himself really flat-footed. And that was allowing Ortiz to get in and out into the pocket, land a few jabs, get out of there, whilst Wilder was just throwing these, like, nonsensical haymakers, just flying, like, knocking him around. I don't know, it was a good fight, but, rounds 8 onwards, you could just see Ortiz was basically just aghast on his feet. He couldn't really move, couldn't really throw anything anymore. And he got into the 10th round, and he was literally just waiting for it to be over. Like, you were just like, right, you could almost see Ortiz throwing the towel in because he looked like he could barely get through the round, never mind another 2. If I'm Anthony Joshua, I was watching that and licking my lips. I think, like you say, the Klitschko-AJ fight was very, very similar, but I also think the standard of boxing was far higher. I do think Klitschko, even in his aged self, was a much more dangerous opponent than Luis Ortiz. And definitely a much more skilled boxer, I would say. And so I think AJ is probably watching that and thinking, I can do this. And he will become the biggest star in boxing. I mean, he's probably the biggest star in boxing right now, especially with current Canelo news coming up.
We'll talk about that in a minute. Yes. But I think, as we've already mentioned, this sets up a fight with Anthony Joshua. Do we see AJ beating Parker? And if so, how do we see the Joshua Wilder fight going down?
It would be so just disappointing if AJ doesn't, and that kind of worries me because, like, is everybody overlooking Joshua Parker? But there's a part of me that just, I'm bought into the movie now. It's like he needs to just not like have too much trouble with Parker. But I mean, Wilder had a very tough fight, and clearly some of Wilder's shortcomings were exposed, which a lot of people I think thought would be. Some of his technique isn't, flawless. He gets away with some stuff because of his height, because of his athleticism, because of his power. So I think AJ will be going into the fight versus Parker quite optimistic, because it's not like Wilder absolutely, smashed Ortiz easily, pushed him aside, so he can afford to, not have the best day. I think that might be the most anticlimactic moment if the person, like the record-breaking heavyweight title fight to determine who becomes, like, kind of realistically the first person to hold all the belts. So realistically, the first ever world heavyweight champion, and it's Parker versus Deontay Wilder.
Yeah.
Like, who wants to see that?
I was gonna say, like, it doesn't necessarily mean we don't get the AJ fight, but yeah, Wilder's gonna go after those belts. I mean, AJ could still challenge for them afterwards. It'd probably take another couple of fights, but it's like you say, it's just when you bought into the narrative. I know some people complain about, like, fans getting too invested in the promotion. They're like, oh, you believe the story, you want this fairy tale, and it's like, yeah, I do. Like, it's like you said, how disappointing it will be for, especially us British boxing fans, when it's like, in our heads, we've practically already decided what's going to happen at the end of this month. We're like, yeah, AJ's going to absolutely steamroll Parker, and then it's going to be him versus Wilder in July in Wembley Stadium. But it's like, I mean, that's a whole question in itself. So far, the fight's not happened because Wilder doesn't want to come here and Joshua doesn't want to go there. Wilder argues the pay-per-view will be better if they do it over there, and then Joshua's saying, well, the gate's going to be much better if we do it over here, which are both true. I don't know. Do you reckon they'll do it here? They have to do it in Wembley. They have to do it in Wembley.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I haven't looked at the pay-per-views for Wilder versus Ortiz, but I feel like
it wasn't a pay-per-view. It was Showtime, so it was on TV. It was free.
Yeah, I don't know what the viewership was then, rather, but I feel like after the Klitschko fight, it would be very difficult for anybody to say that AJ isn't A side. I feel like Wilder will have to make the trip just because of how big AJ is. So I don't think he'll have a choice in the matter, really. I think if he wants the fight, which he clearly does, he has to come to England.
I mean, especially seeing as though that, like, again, assuming AJ wins.
Yeah.
Like, we are jumping many conclusions.
Everyone's just like, right, Parker, just piss off. Like, just move out the way. And he will be every belt holder but the WBO. Is it WBO? Is it Wilder is or WBC?
Oh,
it's the green one, the terrible looking belt.
He's got two, doesn't he?
Oh, was Ortiz a champion?
Yeah. Because I see it always called the boxing heavyweight tournament, and it isn't a tournament. But they all hold belts.
Yeah, but AJ holds 3, doesn't he? So he would hold the majority. So you could kind of argue in that sense, like, well, I got 3, you only got 2. You have to come get them off me.
Yeah.
And I just looked then as well, like, I've heard the argument, and he's kind of true. It's the same with, like, British MMA pay-per-views. It's like, well, they're going to get so many more viewers if they do it at a suitable American time. But I just looked, if they do it at 10 p.m. here, which is about when it would go down, it's only 2:30, 3 o'clock in America. So, like, it's not like nobody will be able to watch it. I mean, Christ, they're complaining about having to watch it mid-afternoon whilst we're all sat with matchsticks in our eyes at 7 a.m. waiting for it to fucking come on. Every time you've got Bruce Buffer doing a long intro, you're like, mate, please, just stop. Like, start the fight. So he's the WBC heavyweight champion.
Yeah.
That's it. So
and then Parker's WBO, and Joshua holds WBA and IBF.
Okay.
Because it's so confusing. Imagine if MMA did that, and you're like, here's the UFC, Bellator, IBF, ACB World Champion. You're like, oh God, we can barely get Conor to fight one championship. I mean, it's going to be the biggest heavyweight boxing fight of a long time. Like, you're talking since the Mike Tyson era. And even then, as far as viewership goes, and especially live gate, it's going to be by far the biggest in the UK. I got to get me a ticket to that.
That'll be, I wonder how much it'll be, though.
I don't think the Klitschko tickets were too bad because I knew a few people. I mean, obviously you're going to end up like basically 3 miles in the air, and nowhere. You might as well be in a separate postcode to the actual ring, but atmosphere is what you're going for, isn't it?
So, as we mentioned earlier, probably the biggest news in boxing currently, Canelo Alvarez tested positive for a banned PED substance, clenbuterol. Kyle, I know you've been very opinionated on this story, especially on Twitter. The keyboard warrior on Twitter that you are.
Yeah.
How do you feel about all this?
I heard he's calling out Canelo.
I actually sold Canelo the tainted lamb or whatever it was that he was saying caused the test to
Tainted
be
Tainted
positive.
Lamb's a really good band, I think.
Yeah.
Check
They sound good.
Spotify.
Yeah, I heard Canelo got the dick pills off John Jones. That's what I heard.
Yeah. Well, it just annoys me, and I'm a big Canelo fan as well. He's one of my favourites, but especially it's even worse because this is the rematch to one of the most controversial boxing fights I can remember, like probably ever, where it was pretty clear to most people that fight was not a draw, and especially seeing when Brendan Schaub tweeted, I think the day before, saying if this fight goes to a decision, there's no way Triple G's winning because they're not going to make money off of that. And he called it so right. So then to have this as well, and then the banned substance thing, I don't. He's coming up with excuses. I don't really know. I haven't looked into it too much, but it's the fact that the fight's going on. I'm pretty sure. I don't know if it's been officially confirmed, but that's what I was seeing, that the fight's still going ahead. So
I think Triple G's agreed to it, but it's not really up to Triple G at the minute because it's Nevada sanctioning. But then it was corrupt enough to get the decision the first time. This is going to be another massive event. Like whether I reckon Nevada will be pushed. I mean, it's Cinco de Mayo as well, so the majority of their pay-per-view will be for Canelo.
Yeah.
And money talks, and so I actually did a little bit of research on the steroid that Canelo tested positive for. I mean, nothing's great when it comes to these positive tests, but when you actually look into what the effects of them are, there are relative severities for how bad they are, and this isn't the worst steroid it could get popped for. So it was clenbuterol, I think you pronounce it as.
Yeah.
And the reason he's attributing it to meat is because it is something they use in, I think it's either horses or cows during their pregnancy. And it just so happens it helps shed fat really quickly, so it's really good for a weight cut, which is why it was banned in the first place, which makes it slightly questionable as to why he would do it now, because he's not scheduled to fight until the 5th of May, so he's not cutting weight yet. And then they've released the quantity of the steroid, and it was very little. And apparently this was an elective steroid test as well, so this wasn't USADA or Nevada. You're allowed to volunteer for certain tests or something, and he actually volunteered for this one and then popped, which I don't know if I was doing steroid.
It's strange.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is all kind of like the John Jones thing, which we'll talk later. It's like, there's questionable as to why the top athlete in any sport would do it in the first place. So it becomes a bit murky if you start saying why would they do it? It's like, well, he got battered last time, so why wouldn't he do it? But I don't know, it's just sad though, isn't it?
But I think we spoke about how Kyle challenged Canelo on Twitter, but another boxer on Twitter, our boy, really, another UK fighter, Billy Joe Saunders, he had some interesting words for both Canelo and for Triple G. I know, Brad, that you were quite a fan of what he said to Canelo.
Yeah, he tweeted Canelo, he's a little ginger faggot, that's all he is. And he tweeted at Triple G and said, let's do this, champ. So if the Canelo fight gets called off, which I don't see it doing, then we we've got Billy Joe versus Triple G, which is a fight a lot of people have wanted to see as well. And we were just talking just before about people sort of very much pinning the Nunes hopes on Cyborg, and Billy Joe's kind of people's pinning their hopes for Triple G getting beat on Billy Joe, and it's kind of another similar situation of if it's not him, it's nobody really. So that could always be an interesting fight to see as well.
Yeah, in his last fight, he was super impressive. He was amazing in his last fight. And yeah, I kind of agree that it's who else is there? But I think moving on now to the MMA news stories of the week. Mentioned it just before, but John Jones has had his license revoked by the California State Athletic Commission and was fined $150,000 for a failed drugs test. So I know we're all huge Jones fans here. How do we feel about this?
Yeah. I'd like you watched the how it went, and it was like I as a Jones fan, I was happy with it, to be honest. I think they were harsh on him in terms of the actual trial, but they weren't too harsh in terms of what they decided on. Still got one more hearing to go with USADA and stuff, but I feel like it went fairly well for John. It wasn't too harsh. So yeah, we might see him back soon.
I think it was an embarrassment. I think more the trial thing was a whole embarrassment and kind of put him in his place and make a name off of who John Jones is.
Yeah, I mean, it was like 4 of the 5 judges were like, yeah, John's amazing, we love him. And then there was just one woman, I can't remember her name, but she was just ripping him apart. I've seen Cyborg fights that are less dominant. But like we talked a couple of weeks ago about how a lot of the narrative around John and the suspension was kind of sounding really positive. Like even Jeff Nowitzki was mentioning on the Joe Rogan MMA Hour how he felt John would be fighting again this year. People around the Jackson Wink camp were saying that he was back. He was posting all these training videos. It did look very promising. I was like, they've definitely got an ace in their sleeve here. Like they're going to come in with this like surprise evidence. And that's it. They're going to be like, oh my God, John, you're innocent. In fact, we're going to schedule you to fight Daniel Cormier next week. And then you're going to fight, and then that's going to be that. And his defense was essentially, I didn't do it. And it was like, oh, that was it? That's what you thought? And he was like, he just kept saying, I mean, it's what everyone in the MMA community was saying anyway. Like, it doesn't make sense for him to take this particular steroid at this particular time. But he kept just saying, it doesn't make sense though, does it? Why would I do it? And they were like, well, that's regardless, Mr. Jones, because you tested positive, so that's why we're here. And he's like, yeah, but it doesn't make sense though, does it? And they're like, no, that's why we're having a trial. And then that whole pissing bit when they were like, oh, you had to do USADA testing, like online tests. Like it was like a course they have to do to basically legitimize a part of the USADA testing pool. And he goes, I didn't do them. And he was like, what do you mean you didn't do it? He was like, oh, I got my managers to do it. And he was like, you realise that was a legal document? He was like, yeah. He was like, you signed it? He was like, no, they forged my signature. He's like, what are you doing? Like, his fucking lawyer was sat next to him with his head in his hands like, oh my Christ.
Do you think when they were preparing it for the defence, like the week before or something, they were like, let's look at John's career highlights. And then they were like, okay, in true John Jones defense technique, we're going to go out on an absolute bender the night before. Because John always defended his titles best when he partied the night before. So why not?
I was gonna say, I think they should have had him do a drugs test after the case.
Yeah.
I think he might have tested positive for something then.
Yeah. He kept making like jokes like about his personality and going like, well, it was like, who else but John?
Yeah.
like, oh my God, can you believe he's done it again? And like, he was just sat there like, no.
Expected the Seinfeld music to hit or something and be like, everybody loves John.
Like an audience backtrack.
Yeah.
And he kept making these jokes and then they were just not landing. and like that makes a difference in a court anyway. I know it's not a court, but oh god, the whole thing was painful to watch. I mean, like you say, it wasn't the worst outcome, but it's like if that was like that, imagine what USADA's going to be like. They're undoubtedly going to make it worse. I was convinced this was going to, a year ban retroactively applied to July, meaning he could be eligible for July again. I think at the minimum, this California ban will last till, I've read, January next year. And although that's only a California state ban, usually the other state athletic commissions will uphold that and say, like, fine, you can't do it in California. It means you can't do it in here either. The only one that might not is Nevada. John just got to rise in, mate. Do whatever you want. Fight Brock Lesnar.
So moving away from UFC into Bellator, the Bellator 200 card, which will take place in London, was announced. Features middleweight champ Rafael Carvalho. Rumours, I think it's been confirmed now that Mirko Krokop will be facing Roy Nelson, and the UK superstar, really, Michael Venom Page, also features. What do we make of this card?
It's amazing.
It's great. It's great.
What I mean, we talked a bit about it earlier in before January when they announced that Chael Sonnen and Rampage and Rory McDonald, Douglas Lima card, and we're just like, what a baller move by Bellator to just like announce this killer card on the same night as UFC. Obviously, UFC came back with UFC 220, which was just like incredible. But I feel like Bellator were holding this to the chest and were waiting for the UFC to unveil a shitty fight night, and it was just like, oh mate, you fucked up. And then they unveil this amazing card because it's not just a pay-per-view. I mean, I don't know if it's a pay-per-view, but it's Bellator 200, so it's a huge event. And for them to do it in the UK, and then it just makes the UFC fight night in London look laughable.
So it's a very smart move if that's what they intentionally did.
I mean, there's always the chance that UFC could pull something out a bit later in the year, but so far...
Yeah. I definitely think it was on purpose. I think that Bellator were thinking, are they going to announce Darren Till or Michael Bisping on this London card? Because if they did, then even if Bellator drop a big card, people are going to be like, but, UFC London, do I want to go to that one instead? And then as soon as, the UFC London, which I'm sure we'll talk about when it takes place next weekend, so I'm sure we'll talk about that next week. But, yeah, it's so smart by Bellator and such a good card. I mean, I was like, Krokop versus Roy Nelson, that's good. Like, that's a classic kind of Bellator style headliner. And then saw that Michael Venom Page is fighting again, and I was like, I'm sold. Fair enough.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely have to look into tickets about that.
Yeah,
because that'll be an amazing fight night.
Does anyone know where it is?
I'm guessing the O2. That's usually where they have their. That's where I think they had the last London Bellator show was at the O2.
I'm intrigued as well because Krokop didn't announce his departure from Rising, which he fought there only. I mean, it was the New Year's Eve card, wasn't it? So 2 months ago? I'd be intrigued to know if he's still in the contract because I'm not sure if Bellator is as strict as the UFC. I know UFC are like, you fight for us and nobody else. Like, you can't do anything but UFC.
I don't think Bellator are, because another thing to kind of entice fans into this card was someone we spoke about a few episodes ago. Paddy Pimblett got called out by a fighter to fight at Bellator 200. And his reply was, I think he said, I don't want to fight any builder, or something along the lines of that. And I was like, that's kind of a good reply. But
yeah.
if Bellator can sign down Paddy Pimblett before the UFC, that'll be a pretty major move for the UK market.
I've always kind of been shaky about the idea of Paddy being in the UFC. I don't know why, but I don't think the clean, almost, I don't want to say the athleticism. I feel like Bellator's more for fighters and the UFC's more for athletes, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's just like a promotional thing or whatever, but I feel like Bellator's a bit of a better fit for Paddy. Like,
yeah, I think so. At this point in his career, I think so. I believe that Crow Cop is still under Ryzen contract, because I was reading earlier that he was saying, despite this move to Bellator, he's still planning on retiring on Ryzen's end of year card at the end of 2018. So I believe he's still under contract at Ryzen. That would be weird for him to say if he wasn't. I hope that we get Crow Cop versus Fedor before that. But
yes, please.
When's Fedor versus who's he fighting?
Frank Mir.
Frank Mir. When's that? That's soon, isn't it?
Yeah, the Bellator 200 is at the SSE Arena in London.
Oh, SSE.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was we've spoken about this on the podcast before about kind of, even if it is an old man tournament, we're still very much excited for Frank Mir versus Fedor.
Yes.
And
April 28th.
April.
That's not far away.
No.
So they both fight pretty close to each other, and then maybe like in August, Fedor versus Crow Cop, and then that gives Crow Cop enough time to finish the end of the year. I mean, this is all assuming that Mir beats Fedor. I mean,
Fedor.
It's still Fedor.
Yeah.
So, Kyle, I have 4 words for you, and I want an instant reaction. Conor McGregor, Burger King.
Best ever. Just out of anything ever. It's my favourite thing, I think. I saw a video, I think it was today, maybe it was yesterday, that MMA Fighting put up, and it was highlights, because it was a year ago yesterday, 2 years ago, sorry, that Diaz McGregor happened, and it was a 10-minute video of like all the highlights of the build up, the after fight, everything, and I was like, wow, that's really made my day. And then Conor McGregor just knocks it out of the park again by doing a video with the Burger King. Oh my god, just in his voice doing his voice works so well for what he said as well, with the spicy chicken. Oh my god, it was amazing, and I found it absolutely hilarious, because one of my favourite moments in combat sports ever is when Floyd Mayweather walked out with the Burger King, and it was the scariest thing I've ever seen. So to see that, I was like, that's
pretty intimidating, isn't it?
He's terrifying. They don't even use him as a mascot anymore. I'm so confused. It's brilliant. It's the best. And for Conor McGregor to look down a camera, I've been really optimistic about Conor McGregor at the moment. He seems to be getting back into his old self, trash talking people left, right, and centre. And then for him to do a video where he's like, we're both kings, but only one of us is the king in MMA. It's like, what are you saying right now, Conor McGregor? What are you saying?
You take the piss all you want, but made me really want one of the new burgers. So
it did.
Kind of worked.
I'll give him
I was
that.
watching it, I was like, that does look pretty good though.
Yeah.
But he posted a picture or a tweet or something the other day, and he put like big news coming. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
please tell me this is a fight. And then he posted that. I was like, what? That was the big news. You paid sponsorship with Burger King. I mean, some people are like, you're selling out, but I'm like, mate, I found it quite entertaining. Like, I don't even hate it. Like, I'm just like, the amount of shit he's getting at the minute for not fighting, and that's his reply to it. It's like, oh, I'm going to film an advert with Burger King.
I want to know how much they paid him. Because this is, first of all, it's
I
Conor
bet you got a
McGregor.
load.
You got to pay him a ton of money. But they flew out and did videos, photos with it. It wasn't just like a one-off. Because Conor, realistically, you could pay him a ton of money, and it's just him videoing himself, being like, yeah, go Burger King, whatever. And that would work. But they flew out and did all this stuff with him. And then, yeah, it was hilarious that he was like, big announcement coming soon, and it's Burger King. But also, it's so confusing on so many levels. Why, if you're promoting Burger King, why Conor McGregor? He's an I don't.
Right. It's like the McDonald's and Olympics thing, isn't it? Like, why the McDonald's support the Olympics? It's like none of those athletes have been near a McDonald's since they were 4 years old.
At the same time, whoever wrote the advert and was like, let's get Conor McGregor to say that "Kings respect kings" to the Burger King mascot. Like, that's brilliant. That's so. I would be terrified if my job was to tell Conor McGregor that's what he has to say. I'd be like, I'm getting a left hand and he's going to steal my belt.
He's up for it, you know. I reckon he's up for it. Like, he's literally got a media team, and he's like, right, I'll need as much money as quickly as possible so I can have one more fight with Nate Diaz and then never fight again. And that'll be it. And I'm just going to capitalise on the hype at the minute. And somebody's like, Burger King are willing to pay you $40 million to do the most dumbass shit you can possibly do. And he's like, yeah, sound. I'll say me and the Burger King are mates. But I noticed as well what was quite interesting. It's like you were saying, he's not just the advert. It was pictures. It's like quite a developed marketing like thing. He posted it on his Instagram, and then it was like a paid sponsorship. You know, where the little tag comes up, paid sponsorship. And I know in this modern era of like social media marketing, that's actually a really, really difficult bargaining chip to put down, because it kind of pollutes the person's brand, as well as not pollutes it, but you know, they're creating an Instagram, especially with a fighter, for them to then put fast food on there. That's a pretty big departure from their brand they're trying to establish. Yeah. So for them to get that as well, I imagine they're getting paid. He's getting paid a lot, because I remember in the lead up to the Floyd fight, I seen that he'd done a sponsorship with some kind of toothpaste or something. It's like High Smile or something like that. And I remember an analyst saying that they'd heard figures of up to 5 million for a 30-second commercial, because Conor had been bragging about how hard it would be to get him on TV just for 30 seconds. And it's like, I can imagine he's absolutely rolling in it from these sponsors. And it's such a sponsorship that if the UFC still allowed it on shorts, he would fucking have the Burger King logo on his shorts.
Just like Anderson Silva did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think my favourite reply to the video was Max Holloway's reply, where he called out Burger King's burgers and then proceeded to tag Wendy's in it, and he's looking for that Wendy's sponsorship now. So
yeah. Fair play to him.
Did you not see him? I can't wait for the 2-strip meal come April 7th or something. I was like, oh mate, Mario Yamasaki even would step in and stop this fight. This is a slaughtering.
It was great, but the one thing that I think all MMA fans, especially me, was left asking was, where is the Artem Lobov advert with Burger King, or is he going to go the other way? Can we get Nate Diaz on a KFC commercial, or like I want this to be a thing now?
Artem Lobov on McDonald's.
I want Nate Diaz sponsored by McDonald's, and I want them to both dress up as the King and Ronald McDonald for the next fight. I think that's the move.
Can you imagine Nate walking around with he's got Nick, Gilbert Melendez, all his Jake Shields, and then just like the Hamburglar. Oh, please.
He's throwing up M signs when he's going into the cage.
Oh, please, pulls off a triangle with the M sign.
The advert, I feel, should be them smoking up, getting baked and getting the munchies, and then going to McDonald's.
Yes, please.
We're saying how hard it is to get these fighters to these adverts. Can you imagine what it's like being Nate and Nick Diaz's sponsorship guy? They're like, right, we just need you to do this advert. Nah, I'm not doing that. Please, it's so much money. I don't give a fuck. This is impossible. And they're like, you're getting me no money. It's like, Nate, you won't do anything.
So moving away from fast food and fighters, I feel that pretty much sums up my lifestyle currently at university. But we're moving now on to some quick news stories with Kyle. So Kyle, what do you have to talk about?
I mean, there's several really good Conor McGregor tweets lately. They're always worth mentioning. On the flip side, the Burger King.
Are any as good as the Burger King?
No, nothing's as good as that. But my favourite one was him congratulating Sage Northcutt, only for Sage Northcutt to reply saying, "Thank you, Mr. McGregor," which is just perfect. That's all you want from Sage Northcutt. So that was great. Literally, a half hour before we started recording, Mike Perry has split up with his girlfriend, who's also like always in his corner. So that's gonna affect him pretty bad. Apparently, he's just like a bit of a nightmare, I'd imagine, to be in a relationship with. I wouldn't know, but I'm just guessing. GSP's been talking about coming back. He doesn't want to fight Woodley, or he's talked about fighting Ben Askren, and he's talked about coming down to lightweight, which I think is pretty insane, unless we get to see him versus Khabib, because I'll watch that. Could get Bisping versus Rockhold 3. That's very exciting. That for me is, apart from, because I've got written down in my news segment part also about Bellator 200, and then the final one on there was McGregor and the Burger King. But apart from those
that
two,
again. I don't think we went over it enough.
Yeah, no. And what was that? I feel that a short mention of Sage Northcutt just isn't enough.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I saw was Northcutt put up the photo of his face onto McGregor's body, but there was a reply in the Instagram comments from Tyron Woodley, and I think it was something like, "Oh, just oh no, kid," and just loads of emojis of like a face palm.
Why?
Really,
there's a weird
I don't
thing.
know why he would put that up for his birthday.
There's a weird thing, right, in the UFC where everyone thinks that Sage Northcutt is their younger brother. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just sort of happens.
I feel like he's my younger brother. He's like 3 foot taller than me and could batter me. And I'm like, oh, bless him. Like, I feel like everyone... It's like I said before, like I kind of feel bad that he even understands what fighting is. I feel like I have to protect him from it every time he gets in there. I'm like, just go easy on him, right? He's my little bro. I don't know, part of me also wants him to like just want to start hanging out with Nick and Nate Diaz. I've never wanted someone's life to go a little bit off the rails more than Sage Northcutt. Like, I want to start growing his hair out and start throwing up gang signs.
I feel better now. We've spoken about Sage Northcutt. That's good. We've gotten that in.
Yeah.
But finally, we're going to finish this podcast with our lovely and bubbly Northerner and the anger that runs deep through his veins. So, Brad, what do you have beef with this week?
This is like weekly therapy. It's fantastic. So, I recently got UFC 3, the game, and it was very, very tempting to go on a 20-minute tirade about this shit stamina mechanisms and why my fighter seems to be absolutely enabled to be staying on 2 feet more than me after a litre of vodka. But we won't go into that. That's for a later date when I've got more to talk about, more fights under my belt. So this week I'm going to be talking about the incessant Ric Flair imitations that have started plaguing every single UFC event. I remember it starting a few months ago, and you just heard the odd woo in the background, and I love Ric Flair. I think he's amazing, but I just don't understand where this came from. Like, it's so annoying that you hear it at the start of the event when there's like 4 people watching the first opening prelim fight, and you just hear a woo, and then somebody echo it somewhere, and you're like, oh, here we go. And then it just takes one fight in the main featured prelims, or whether it's early on the main card, to start getting boring for maybe like 10 seconds, and then it's like a flock of fucking chickens piping up, and it's like, who are these inbred people? Like, who? I mean, like, I understand it. You go to an MMA fight, you've had a few drinks beforehand, you get there, you're with your buddies, you're all acting a bit leery, you're all getting a bit crazy, you know, you're screaming for your favourite fighters, and then the fight gets a bit boring, and somebody goes, woo! And you're like, I'm going to shout woo as well. I've got a news flash for you, mate. If you shout woo and imitate Ric Flair at a UFC event, there's a good chance your mother doesn't love you. People, like, and the worst thing about it is it's not going to stop. It's the worst thing with these kinds of things. Like, it's now that it's got infamy, people love the notoriety of it, and people love being contrarians. They just love doing things that annoys people, and so it's got worse. Like, there was a point, I think it was the Kat Zingano fight this weekend at UFC 222. It was deafening. Yeah, like, if there wasn't audio mixing, you'd probably be able to hear it over the commentating. And I don't understand what it is about the UFC in particular, because you watch Bellator events and it doesn't happen. You watch Cage Warriors events, it doesn't happen. You watch Invicta, it doesn't happen. And then the UFC, it's just woo, 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 woo. And like, is this going to be an MMA fan thing now, or a UFC fan thing? Like, I've yet to find anyone that even thinks it's acceptable. It's not even crowd participation. It's just annoying. And I can't imagine what it's like for the fighters as well. It's probably worse than booing. Like, at least if people are booing, you can assume that they're taking interest in the fight. They're just not liking what they're seeing. With the wooing, it's almost like, oh, we're just being drunk and idiotic. We're not even watching the fight. We're just being annoying. I want it to stop. I just want it to stop, and it's not going to. And
nice.
I could go on for about another 30 minutes, but I'm just going to cut it short now before I wind myself up even more.
No, people who know me know I'm a massive fan of Ric Flair, and I'm wearing my Ric Flair hat currently. Just a quick shout out. I will wear a Verdict MMA hat and t-shirt everywhere we go if we do get sponsored. But
I'll get it tattooed. Never mind the t-shirt.
And I have to admit, when I went and saw UFC in England, I was one of these guys to start woo chants. But I agree with you. It's getting out of control. And
it is very unrelated, but we are sad to announce Conor's departure from Cage-Side Combat. It's a mutually agreed thing before this podcast. This is his last one with us, so if you'd all like to tweet him and say how much you've enjoyed listening to him.
That's not true. I hope so.
Yeah, it wasn't mutual.
Okay, so we're going to conclude this podcast. Brad, where can they find you on Twitter?
At Stupid Flanders with an extra S on the end.
Kyle, where can they find you?
Kyle_Diamond.
I'm at Conor.Whelan73. You've been listening to the Verdict MMA podcast.
Right.
I'm just getting the practice in.
Yeah, why not?
It's at Verdict MMA.
Thank you for listening to us, and we will see you next time.